Om mano na buddhi na sharira indriyam tanmatram bhutani na bhuta panchakam aham kritas chapi vyat swarupakam tami shamatvanam upriti shashvatam. Om shantihi shantihi shantihi. That one attains to the supreme Brahman, who dissolves mind, intellect, the senses, the gross and subtle elements, the five sheaths, along with the ego, into that ocean of indivisible consciousness. Om, peace, peace, peace. Om satyena labhyastapassa yesatma samyagyanena brahmacharena nityam antaha sharirehi jyotirmayo hi shubraha yam pashanti yatayaha kshinadoshaha. Om shanti shanti shanti. The Atman, the indivisible self in all beings and all things, is realized by moderation, by knowledge, by austerity, and by veracity. All of these constantly cultivated. When mental impurities dissolve due to this practice, then the seer beholds it everywhere, existing in everything, even here, in this very mind and body. Om, peace, peace, peace. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Saha Viryam Karavavahai Tejasvi Navaditamastu Ma Vidvishovahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May Brahman protect us. May Brahman sustain us. May Brahman illumine our thinking process. May we not find fault with each other, with the world, or with the teachings, and may what we study be a source of inspiration to us eternally. Om, peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us, and may peace be unto all. Om Hari Om. So another dozen of us have gathered here today. Just like yesterday, on this weekend of classes on the Adhyatma Upanishad, not to be confused with the Adhyatma Ramayana, which is another great non-dual scripture you must read. When I was in India, took Lexikson to India and his family for their first visit there. He came up to me while we were staying at the Gold Park Institute of Culture in Calcutta and handed me the Adhyatma Ramayana. He just finished it. He said, "You must read this now." So I had my first reading of that, and where Sri Ram gives all those great teachings to Lakshman, his half-brother, and to Sita and to Hanuman, and anyone else who wants to come up and ask him anything about the Dharma, which you know here is king. It's the highest teaching inside of words and thoughts, and it's also the only solution to all the problems of the world. If the world would learn it, qualify themselves in it, and turn to it, then you would see some positive change worth mentioning. Otherwise, it's all flux. And in that case, we find ourselves swimming in that flux sometimes, trying to stay afloat. And this is against not only the vicissitudes and vagaries of Maya in the world, but the constant changes in our mind. We'll maybe look at that a little bit today if we get that far. I always have bigger eyes than stomach for these charts that I like to present, now most of them in full color. And so I bring a lot to give, but There's only so much you can compact into a mere 3 hours, although that seems to be quite a lot for most people, one bite at a time style. We like to deluge the mind with these teachings, and some people say that it's too much for me, and I say, but just be a sponge, soak it all in, and then go squeeze it out later, and keep what's essential to you out of that particular class. Go back later and see things you missed in this live streaming media that we're involved in now. Welcome to the live streaming audience that's probably watching from Iceland and Hungary and India and other countries, Australia, if the hour isn't too indecent there at this time, and some of our own brothers and sisters on the East Coast and in Hawaii. We welcome you all here to the SRV Oregon Ashram, and continuing on with the Adhyatma Upanishad in a fashion that is in keeping with the Dharma to the best of our knowledge and ability. It's a very ancient Dharma, of course. Actually, ancient here means eternal. Sanatana Dharma, they call it. There are some, there's a few sects that are actually named Sanatanis, and they don't take the wide, open, Catholic, universal view of India's teachings and the world's teachings as the Vedantists in the stream of Swami Vivekananda do. So it's hard to call ourselves or to put a title like Sanatana Dharma on such a abundance of teachings that India provides for us, all of them on the spiritual level. That is true religion, not irreligion, as Swami Vivekananda says, blended with non-dual philosophy, not just occupational philosophy. And then, as I said yesterday, add in, hopefully in this day and age, heaping helpings of Divine Mother worship, love, and dig deep for her into the words and their meanings. As we were doing yesterday when we unwrapped just 2 or 3 slokas with teachings like the tip and bulk of the iceberg. So we know that all of this that we see, taste, touch, hear, and smell has come from something below the surface. That is, the mind is the next subtle level. This is all a manifestation of the mind, and all the Indian schools, the mind-only schools they're called, have taught that from time out of mind. And so this means that the ego-mind complex has a finger or two, maybe all 10 thumbs and fingers into this process of manifestation. We call it projection or shrishti. It's not actually creation out of nothing. It's a projection of everything that's in the seeds of the mind, as we were talking about yesterday, the bulk of the iceberg that gets projected above the surface, and then we get attracted to the surface and sort of hypnotized by it, because as Kapila was telling us yesterday, just even a very small drop of that prakriti is manifest, and the bulk of it is unmanifested. So talk about infinity, or no beginning, middle, and end to anything. You can come to believe that statement and make it your own, a part of your own conclusion and philosophy, if you just barely even look out in space or look at people, look at your own face, recount and analyze what's in your own mind, and think of them as seeds that are being watered, and then maybe stop watering those ones that are producing undesirable results. That's just punya and papa to the Buddhists. You just do merit and you quit doing demerit, and that will right the ship. It'll take the water out of the boat. The boat should be in the water. The water should never get in the boat, as Ramakrishna used to say. And besides, he said, when you get out of the boat, you get into the boat, you should be the first one in. It sounds backwards, doesn't it? But that's so you can help everyone in. And then be the last one out, and that's because you can see what people have left behind and give it back to them. So this kind of sensitivity is all a part of Vedanta, in its little tiny details that you think would not matter to these essential facts of existence. the 5 fundamental facts of existence. You've seen that chart before. The first one being all of this manifestation coming out of Brahman, but Brahman never changes as a result of it. So the whole iceberg is in the ocean, this iceberg of Prakriti, manifested and unmanifested, and that ocean needs to be explored. And the best way to explore that is to become water, as we were saying yesterday. A wave is limited, but it is connected. So through those connections called vyahritis in Sanskrit, there's some conjunctions they're called also. We have a chart on those. You discover worlds like Bhur, Bhuva, Swaha, Mahar, Jana, Tapaloka, Brahmaloka. Over cycles of time, they're forgotten again, and then seers come back in cycles of time, see like Buddha did, and they see people laboring under one particular weight or veil. And they'll put their attention on that veil and break through that so that beings can march inward. And so they will have to discover the 4th loka, as one particular rishi did in the past in one of the recent cycles. And then that will, of course, get forgotten in another cycle. It has to be uncovered again. And what's the purpose of all this? We were talking about that around the table yesterday, and it is to skim the surface of that ocean of milk, and called Ekarnava, the waters of existence, and find those souls who are ready to step out of those cycles. I'm gone and gone forever, as Lord Buddha said. And if one ever does return again to those worlds, as kind of been the subject of these slokas we've been studying, then one must come back in full consciousness. Should a man be reborn, they asked Vivekananda. He said, I certainly hope he will not until he can do so in full consciousness. So coming in anything short of that is risky in Maya. So you choose dharmic parents in advance, and you train yourself to know what dharma is. And you could say, well, too bad we didn't have dharmic parents. Fortunate we had moral parents and ethical parents and so forth. But one advantage of not having dharmic parents is that when you see the truth, it hits you all the harder. Like I've been teaching in prisons, and I told the truth in prison, you see, when I brought the Vedanta in. And I remember one inmate, whom we all know fairly well, who brought another soul into the fold of SRV, got really angry at me, came up afterwards and said, do you mean to say that my parents and the society and the world has all been telling me lies all this time? Mm-hmm. He was really upset. And I calmed him down and said, yes, that's true, in the sense that these conventions and these beliefs are not taking you deep enough. And some of them, over time, everything gets decrepit and corrupt. You might have noticed if you're getting into your 60s and 70s that even your own precious body, as it were, does the same thing. So you stand as a bulwark against that kind of decay, and you do that by keeping this mental posture, this manasana of I am Atma Brahma, this self is Brahman, or Tattvamasi, I am that, or Aham Brahmasmi, I am Brahman. These kinds of non-dual statements are meant to shore you up. As my teacher said, not enough just to affirm them, you have to then practice afterwards, and that's do sadhana. So that's one of the misunderstandings already afoot in the West, is that you hear this non-dual truth and you automatically jump to it. Sri Ramakrishna described that as jumping from the lowest step to the highest step. Well, if you can do it, if you're that good a high jumper, good luck with that. But you don't know anything of what happened between the steps. You don't know any of the middle steps. And so I've even been criticized for focusing too much on cosmology and not enough on non-duality. But my non-duality, the way I understood it from the teacher who gave it to me, the teachers, Nityasarupanandaji Maharaj and the Sheshanandaji Maharaj, were both disciples of Holy Mother, and her own assessment of non-duality includes worship. It includes form. And that Shakti Advaita is bringing Mother into the quotient because she's the connecting point of all connecting points. She's the Mahavyariti. You see, not just the little connections that you have to make in your mind to prana, body to prana, mind and body to mind, body and prana to mind, and then those three to the intellect. These connections you need to do to open up these nadis that we were talking about yesterday, inflate the nadis in the Walker of the Skies chart, so that this Mother Shakti, Chit Shakti, can get flowing in you. And like she did in Sri Ramakrishna, and never stopped. Took him all the way to the crown of the head, to the Sahasrara, and gave him highest samadhi, and then allowed him to stay in Bhavamukha. My teacher used to say one of the greatest gifts of Sri Ramakrishna is that he remained in Bhavamukha. He didn't go into Nirvikalpa Samadhi and then just dissolve. Bhavamukha means, in simple terms, he used to say, you have the rice fields and there's water, and rice in the water, and or even the cane fields that have been cut have these sharp things. You have to put sandals on to move through it, he said. But in Bhavamukha style, he said, there's these bulks that go through the field. So if you get up on them, you can pass through the field without having to wade through the water. And you can see both sides. So he said, that's how he described Bhavamukha. I wanted to go into Nirvikalpa Samadhi and dissolve myself, and Mother came to me and said, no, I want you to stay in Bhavamukha. So he had to perch himself on one of those rice bulks, from which he said I could see both God and the world. So that's the idea. It's a very comprehensive samadhi. Yes, you could say if you're a sterile non-dualist, to say, oh, he kept some form, you see, that's too bad for him. But if you have a more wide open or universal perspective, you could say, how marvelous that he remained behind for others, and he could look at the world and its affairs and people and help them, bodhisattva style, jivan mukta style. So we are actually studying the jivan mukta slokas, 5 of them here. I'll reread them for you. Yesterday's was, it is that incomparable one whose self is merged in Brahman alone, who is immutable and quiescent. That wisdom, pragya, is defined as the unwavering spiritual mode, the context of which is the unity of Brahman and Atman, purged of all limiting adjuncts. Whosoever possesses that wisdom, existing without a break, is liberated in life. And that was Adhyatma Upanishad 1:43 and 44. 45, you took yesterday, and that one who has no conceit of I, means ego, of course, with regard to body and senses, and no conceit of objects with regards to things other than them, who is free from those two conceits in regard to anything whatsoever, is liberated in this life. So taking to task the body-mind mechanism and the senses and their focus on the objects only, but this is Brahman only they're talking about. One of the precious 6 jewels in our tradition is samadhana, where you're able to meditate on Brahman only to the exclusion of everything else. They say, Danur grihitva upanishadam mahastram sharam hupasanashita sanjayita ayamya tad bhavakatena chetasa laksham tadevaksharam somya vidhi. The wisdom, vidhi, which is a nectar, soma. See? So it says, taking as weapon that mighty bow, fasten to it the arrow of your mind, make sure the arrow has been sharpened by thoughts on reality alone. So you must be able to meditate on that reality only, which is a bit of a task when you don't know what that is. And number 2, when it's unknowable. See, these are the conundrums that come in when you not only enter any one school like Zen or Chinese Buddhism or Vedanta or any of those schools, but when you try and mix the 2 or 3, you see, before you've dug one deep well and are grounded in one of them, and that's kind of describes America's diet. It's sort of a combination of things and hodgepodge of undigested spiritual moods, it was called. to understand it deeply and properly and right orientation, starts you off on the right footing. So otherwise you get a combination, a kind of clouded mind, and stay too much on the surface of things. So be free from those two conceits. Take the ego out of the quotient. And objects and senses, let them befriend one another. But you, O mind, stay focused on the lotus feet of Mother Kali, is how Sri Ramakrishna put it. Let the objects and senses befriend one another, but you stay focused on the feet of Mother Kali. So that one-pointed concentration is called samadhana. You're able to exclude everything but just the Lord. That is the ultimate. So then if it is impossible to define that, even to know it, as it's been said, then you're going to need to know the stages leading up to it. Dharma, Guru, Ishvara, God with form, all of those need to be, those are the steps in between. And you qualify yourself in those, not only so that you can hopefully make one foray to that crown chakra and don't fall back, because you can fall into that problem that Father of Yoga mentions about developing a habit of failure in spiritual life. Labdha bhumi kattva. You take one step forward and two steps back. And it's based on the fact that you tried your best to reach that ultimate goal and you fell back. You start to make a habit of doing that. So hopefully you'll make that one foray upon that and storm the gates of absolute reality and penetrate through. So that's the first thing. The second thing is then you know what the steps are, so you can come back to help others. Keshab Chandra Sen, who was very famous in Calcutta, and Sri Ramakrishna was unknown. Now we only know Keshab Chandra Sen because Sri Ramakrishna. But he went up to Sri Ramakrishna, the leader of the Brahmo Samaj, and said, and loved Ramakrishna very much. In fact, his students were jealous of Keshab's love for Sri Ramakrishna. But Keshab said, "Oh, I want to go into samadhi like you do all the time. I know you see Brahman face to face," which is what Gandhi said about Ramakrishna, by the way. He sees God face to face. And when we see Ramakrishna, we see God face to face, Gandhi said. So Keshab went up to Sri Ramakrishna, and I wish I could go into samadhi all the time like you do. I would go to the farthest shore, and I would burn the canoe, as it were, and I would stay there and never come back. And Ramakrishna said, "Why? What are you speaking of? What would happen to them?" He pointed to his students and the women folk that were there, so told him that's a mean ideal. He said the same thing to Swami Vivekananda too. Swami Vivekananda said, "My highest ideal would be to go into samadhi all the time, come out just once in a while, eat a little food, and go back into samadhi." Sri Ramakrishna said, "You're more than that. You're worth more than that." So all of this kind of around the subject, but I'm just saying that in America, this idea of a Sputnik Samadhi is not a good idea. That's how one of my older Caucasian teachers, Mr. Morosi, Eli Morosi in Hawaii, used to call it the Sputnik Samadhi, because Maharishi Mahesh Yogi was leader of TM. He was unknown, but he came to our Vedanta Society before he got known, and tried to give Eli Morosi Sputnik Samadhi. And Mr. Morosi said, "No, thank you," and went back to his quiet ways. But this has gotten into the culture then, this idea of you can get a quick, swift enlightenment, just like you can get a swift, perfect cup of coffee up the street, or whatever it is that you're after. Quick fruits, instead of the long, sometimes seemingly laborious way of sitting, like in a Zen monastery for months, meditating every morning. Or in my teacher's ashram just up the street, where you'd have lunch there and then you'd sit in the shrine room with the curtains closed in the dead of summer at 90 or 100 degrees heat, with the women sitting in back of you, sweating, meditating for an hour or two while waiting for him to come down and break the meditation in your 20s, So it's a very laborious, hard process. And it It's an austerity. We just chanted. The Atman is realized by austerity, by moderation, by veracity. And these have to be constantly cultivated. So if you don't get them quick, then you must not be strong on fire, like Swamiji called the Americans. They flare up right away, interested, and then they burn out. But you have to take that long, slow advance, stage by stage, and come to know all the steps, and then go into samadhi without fear of falling out of it. And so that is why Swami Sheshanand used to say, affirmation is not enough. You have to follow it up by spiritual discipline, sadhana. So dharma and sadhana is pretty much what we focus on here. We hear the teachings, shruti, and then we roll them around in our mind and study. That's jnana yoga sadhana, and mix in healthy amounts of worship of Mother and so forth. Meditation in the morning, serving all beings as God to the best of our capacity. And then shruti, yukti, anubhava, and then you get the direct experience of the thing that you're seeking. And if you read the Gospel of Ramakrishna and you hear his words, it could be misleading to you if you have that kind of immature mind yet, seeking quick results, because he's starting at the level of direct experience. Like, for instance, when he says, oh, mere book learning, and looks down, he's not talking about the scriptures. People come to me and say, well, Ramakrishna didn't like the scriptures. What do you mean? He kept the Ashravakra Samhita next to him all the time. He had Vivekananda read from it every day when he was a young boy. I don't think it doesn't mean throw away the scriptures. Vivekananda said later, we should definitely go beyond Bible, Quran, and Gita, but not by tossing them out, by studying them and learning them, and then going beyond them. That's where Ramakrishna starts, you see, at Anubhava, direct spiritual experience, and that's where he's speaking from. And I mean, this is a man who lives beyond that dharma, beyond those teachings, and has to come down, he said, run a boat race down to this chakra to speak the truth that he just experienced, and then to this chakra to talk with the devotees. He used to say, I cherished one desire only for this world, and that was to become king of the devotees. And so he got his desire fulfilled by Mother herself. Mother Kali cherished him in that way. And as a result, because of the dark age we're in, that light shines above all else now. He's the new dispensation. He's the new avatar, and gaining ground quickly with the masses, but that hardly matters. He started out with 12 penniless boys, you see, and added on 16, 4 more came, and so pretty soon they were, as I used to call them, an ocean of ochre or orange that just swept over the world, and is continuing to do so, like an ochre tide. You see, ochre meaning renunciation of the world, and so they inundate it. So just like this wisdom has to inundate your mind today, and we practiced that sponge method. And the sieve method is just here, take this little trickle, one sloka. And you may even want to practice that later on your own. But in the meantime, soak it in, knowing that it's already in you. You don't get enlightenment by the guru's feet or by study of scripture or by any other thing. Yes, you definitely are enlightened. You know everything. All knowledge lies within you. Be thee perfect, I and my Father are one, tat tvamasi, and so forth. But now you have to realize it in this lifetime. Just like we talk about the great rishis having to come back and discover these new inner worlds anew and give them out to the people of the day, you too have to do that every lifetime you come back. You have to recall what you know and bring it to the surface as quickly as you can. If you have a swift recall like Vivekananda, you can go to a country like America in 1893, walk into a friend's library like he did, lock himself in there for 2 or 3 days and read the whole set of encyclopedias. And then come out and question him, and he knew everything he read. He recalled everything in the encyclopedia, detail by detail. How many toes does a gecko lizard have, and so forth. They ask him all sorts of, look under G. He was right, you see. So, this recall will come pouring forth once you just prick the bubble, you see. You think that you're learning from the outside, and that's a misnomer. All this knowledge is already within you, but you have to find that elastic covering, you see, that with the arrow made sharp by thoughts on reality alone, prick that, and then all of it comes rushing forward. We had that yesterday when we talked about this rain cloud of virtues. See, it's called rain cloud of virtues. That's Dharma, Mega, Samadhi. It's just all this Dharma comes flowing to that person who opens up to it. And I started out the class a bit yesterday like that, saying take that mental perspective first, that all is within you, then go out and start talking. So maybe a little bit embarrassing, or was embarrassing to the teachers, but when I spoke at a college recently, and the young were in front of me, I said, first thing I said to them, I was looking at them, I said, what are you doing here again? They looked at me like, we've never seen you or met you. I said, you're here learning the subject again, you know this all, it's all inside of you. Open up to it and have it flood forth. Be a genius in your own lifetime. And I mean, the pundits can do that. They can recite all day by memory. And that's only one thin veneer of India's wisdom. It's ritualism and so forth. But the mind has all of that inside. The Brahman priest who's twice born, takes the thread and so forth, comes back in another lifetime, and why do you think he can immediately recall all these scriptures and recite for hours at a time? He isn't spending a lot of time working on that. He just works on it for a little while. The floodgate opens. It all comes to him. You see. So that's retentive memory. It's aided by celibacy and by these yogic practices. So if you do the foundational requisites, if you observe them, then all of a sudden you have this spiritual power flowing inwards, upwards, as these charts were speaking about. And that's where we sort of pick it up here in Sloka 46, I think, which we mentioned yesterday. That one, in his wisdom, perceives no difference between the subject and Brahman, who neither refers nor defers to creator nor creation, is liberated in this life. So it sounds like a being, and I said that, who had gone up all the steps and reached the summit. And doesn't need to defer to creation anymore, or even refer to it, until he comes down and wants to teach the Dharma to others. And that's a good thing, we're saying. We want to see people like that. The avatar we were talking about yesterday, the avatar is fully realized soul plus something else. It's an add-on. The add-on is he helps the fallen and the lowly. So because he helps the fallen and the lowly, people misjudge him as being lowly, lower than the seers. And that's not the case. He's got more than the seers. He's got more than the non-dual seers in him and in her. So their mere presence teaches. When Swamiji was going to come to the West and so forth, and Sri Ramakrishna knew this was in his destiny, Swamiji said, I can't teach anything. He said, laughed at him, said, your very bones will teach. Just your presence will cut through Maya for people. Then years later, he was here in the West, in Chicago and so forth, and some of the priests and churchgoers that were there around him said he was also doubting whether he could speak to the Westerns, and he made a comment, something like, to speak at the part of the religion. He said, well, am I really qualified? I don't have any credentials with you in the West. And the priest said to him, Swamiji, asking you for credentials is like asking the sun for permission to shine. So you'll know a person like that, and immediately, and you get attracted. All beings become attracted to the knower of Dharma. That's right from the Upanishads. It's also mentioned in different ways in the Buddhist scriptures. So that Dharma has not just been learned in that one lifetime, it's been added on to for many lifetimes. Probably except in the case of Anitya Siddha, which is what Sri Ramakrishna called Swami Vivekananda, eternally perfect soul. I asked my teacher about that once. But Swami Vivekananda is called, I was in my late 20s, Swami Vivekananda was called an eternally perfect soul, but look at what trouble he had in the world. Look at how his father passed away and everyone deserted him, and he had to go try to look for a job, which wasn't his destiny, and arrived at Sri Ramakrishna's feet with, in a relative panic to try and take care of his parents. That doesn't sound like an eternally perfect soul. I had this idea of what that should look like. And Swami Sheshananda looked at me and said, "That's because you're a fool." Perfunctorily dismissed me, and didn't even answer the question. So I thought about that in my foolishness and realized that these appearances have to be seen through, that it's not walking on water and producing miracles and so forth. Holy Mother said that's the byproduct of spiritual life. Character is the real essence of spiritual life, so you must build your character and not get attracted to either hypnotic visions nor divine visions. Father of Yoga says there are 4 great obstacles to yoga. Yoga meaning union, natural union. And one of them is this spiritual visions, the bliss that comes from having these inner experiences. So I always describe that as man comes out of a forest, hungry, almost starving, has been lost for days, he's wet and cold, and he sees a sign that says civilization 10 miles. And he clings to the sign and never leaves it. So he doesn't go that final 10 miles to actually find his succor and relief. He attaches to the first semblance of a sign that there is such a thing. So that's what people are often doing in their spiritual life. They get a vision, they'll cling to it, they'll start a business around it. A couple of years ago I saw a brochure somebody had sent me, says, "Oh, I've had Nirvikalpa Samadhi." If I've had Nirvikalpa Samadhi, why are you printing brochures? Why do you have a business? They're really demeaning that highest Samadhi by speaking of it in that terms. You'd be in an ecstasy of vision, or you'd be dissolved like a hailstone in an ocean if you had that Samadhi. And here we can come and put it on brochures, just as if it's nothing. We're talking about the highest experience possible, according to all the greatest seers of the world, in many religions. So let's keep that sacrosanct. Ramakrishna used to say that. Brahman is the only thing that's never been defiled by the tongue of man. So Vivekananda said there are 2 tendencies in us. One is to drag Brahman down here to the world. It's not possible, but we try and do it anyway, because God's not in the world. The world is in God, as he said. The second tendency is to try and raise yourself inward to that Brahman and become that Brahman, know that Brahman, and so forth. And he said, unfortunately, most of us take that first route. We try and bring God here to the world. Well, you can spiritualize matter. This is called deification. But what you're doing is deifying the manifested Brahman part, the Brahman with qualities, saguna. The nirguna Brahman is not possible for you to do that to. The Divine Mother of the Universe, Uma, was born to King Himalaya. King Himalaya knew he had the Divine Mother as his child, so he waited for her to grow up enough to understand words and ask her for visions. I know you can give me a vision with Hanuman. And so she gave him a vision of Hanuman. I know you can give me a vision of Shiva. Vision of Shiva came. All the forms he went through, and baby Uma gave him everything. Finally, he'd been completely glutted and satiated of divine visions. And he went to her and said, well, now can you give me the non-dual experience? No, little child went, for that you have to attend upon realized souls. You can only get that as a kind of osmosis by being in the presence of realized souls. So that's not grantable, as it were. But is Brahman so unknowable? Well, there's a song in India that says, try with all your strength and energy, O mind, to fathom and understand the divine mother of the universe. You'll never be able to do it, but the attempt will purify your mind. So, Sri Ramakrishna used to give his answer to that question, is Brahman knowable or unknowable? He said, it's knowable by the pure mind, because the pure mind is Brahman. I and my Father are one has to have some place to lay its head, in relativity, that it can be accessible, a doorway to samadhi. 6 esoteric doorways to yoga. It's all about moments of time, adding together, and particles in space, adding together to objects. And pretty soon, it's the first 2 or 3 doors. You understand that, like the physicists began to do at Einstein's time. And then after that, you have to go beyond the intellectual frame of reference. And what happens next is you see particles being attracted together as objects, and moments as time flowing, being together as days and years and lokas and so forth, are all unreal. It's all a show. And that's like the 3rd and 4th esoteric doorway to yoga. You realize that it's all an appearance. It's all unreal, as Vedanta calls it, or empty, as the Buddhists call it. And then you can back off from it. You don't court it anymore. So, again, having these experiences is just different than reading about them or even hearing about them. Those are all important steps, but as we say, Sri Ramakrishna starts off right there and talks about mere book learning of the pundits as compared to these non-dual scriptures and the words from the enlightened souls that can awaken you. Sparsha diksha, hasta diksha, mantra diksha, pada diksha. There are many kinds of dikshas, and sparsha means the spoken word. You can sit in the presence of a being and get touched by the word. Vak diksha is probably better said, but it's a touch, sparsha, of vak, the word, on your presence, you see. He might also touch you like Krishna did to Arjuna on the battlefield, like Sri Ramakrishna did to Swami Vivekananda when he first met him as a teenager, and raised his consciousness right out of those lower atmospheres, those denser atmospheres, right into the highest reality. Drugs will do that. The West found out for a brief moment, and then you'll fall out of it and find out that later that you prematurely opened up the door. You weren't ready for it, so you couldn't hold it. And now it's going to be more difficult to open the real door. And you get dependence upon things that give you quick fix, like Shaktipat Diksha, you see. Or some peacock feather or something happens to you, see. But you have to go back and get more later. We work differently in the Ramakrishna order. We work through a seed. We give mantra diksha. That's a seed in your heart. You water it with the tears of your love and practice. It turns into a small tree and grows, and you never have to go back to your teacher or any other seer again. You yourself become that. That thou art. Of course, becoming is tongue-in-cheek. You're already that, but you have to go through this practice. Try as hard as you can to realize this highest goal. You'll never be able to do it, but your mind will get purified in the offing, and all of a sudden you'll wake up one day, as the Indian bhajan sings, I woke up this morning and my ignorance was gone, utterly gone. Who can conceal the truth, he goes on. Who can tie a blazing fire in a cotton cloth? See, so that truth is a blazing fire that will burn through everything. Vivekananda used to say that. I can compare truth to the most corrosive substance in all the 3 worlds. It'll burn through everything. Finer matter quickly, denser matter take more time. See, so just like a river will cut a canyon, a grand canyon over time. You see that river of Dharma flowing in your mind will cut deep through all appearances and finally deliver to you what you've been seeking all your lives. And it'll come in different ways to different people at different levels. Here, though, he is talking about a being that does not refer to these processes anymore, does not have to, and does not defer to them either. So a being who's at that high level, like Buddha coming out of nirvana, would not speak, maybe could not speak about it. at first. And then later, when he could, decided not to for a while. I'll teach those rascals a lesson. They left me in the woods before I got nirvana. They didn't have faith in me, you see. Now I'm shining with light, and they come crawling back, you see. So, whatever the case, he was so full of compassion, I'm sure he didn't have thoughts like that, right? So he finally broke the silence, and that's happened in so many cases to so many great souls. So if you're around there when the lotus blooms in the wood, and the bees will come naturally, then you get that nectar. Amrita Bindu, a drop of that nectar, which makes a man a god, a woman a goddess, and so forth. So that kind of being, if they do break silence, if they do stay in Baba Mukha, if they do come down to a level of consciousness that is accessible, like the heart chakra is, to the devotees, who probably are only getting embodied just so they can see God in form, many of them. If his one desire was to become the king of devotees, then he was fulfilling that in order for thousands and thousands of devotees of the Lord to actually see God in form, to have God as their baby, like King Himalaya, baby Uma, or like Chandramani and so forth, Ramakrishna's parents and Sharda's parents, and they were all that time, waiting for that child. Vivekananda made a beautiful statement once, and you can read it in our newest issue of Nectar of Non-Dual Truth. It says, "My parents prayed for lifetimes to get me as their child." It's a direct quote from him. So this is how they think of childbirth in India. It's not about, certainly not about the things people think about here for their children, nor about just satisfying some desire and having one pop out as a result. It's about lifetimes of prayer to get this great soul to come through. That's going to be a service of the householder, the dharmic householder, for the rest of the world, to produce a child like that. And it'll also satisfy their desire to be close to God. They'll see God in form. These are the real meanings behind Jesus in the manger and the birth of Ramana Maharshi and all the bookends of India, these great souls. The real meaning is that these souls come out of formless reality, and like a sun cast like a billion suns cast in a mold, they shine like that. There's a song that says that. Stimita chit sindhu bedi, out of this ocean of consciousness came this bright child who glowed like a sun, like a billion suns cast in a mold. And it came down to the arc of the earth, which was suffering, through the star-strewn path, and appeared as Sri Ramakrishna. The song written by Swami Shardananda. So those kinds of souls, yes, they neither defer nor refer to it, but don't all of a sudden think that you can be that, or that they cannot change their mind. I believe that Swami Vivekananda, since he was a Nityasiddha, was also a Videha Mukta. He was never coming back to the form again, and that Ramakrishna convinced him to do that. There's a song about that too. So, Holy Mother said, Swami Vivekananda is a soul that sits in meditation in this subtle body for 700 years at a time, unmoving. So, using that bit of her wisdom, they crafted the song about how Vivekananda, Ramakrishna told the story from his own lips about how he approached this great seer, the seventh of the seven rishis, and approached him and asked him to come down to earth with him. The earth is sinking in the arc of lust and greed. Won't you come down with me? And then they beamed down into Calcutta, and those are 18th century, 1800s. So these great minds can change, great beings can change their mind, or they can be changed. And the movement is definitely out of a higher compassion, but a very mature compassion. Because we were saying yesterday, remember, that they come here and they know there's going to be 95% of the population that are going to revile them, that are going to try and kill them, that are not going to listen to them. And that's why spirituality never has gotten a real foothold in this world. Religion got a foothold, but religion declines every 1,000 to 2,000 years, as we know from Sri Krishna in the Gita, who admits it. So there is definitely a distinction between religion and spirituality, and we don't use spirituality here in the terms of, attending a seance or any other kind of occult level of practice that people do. We're using it in terms of Advaita Vedanta or the schools of non-duality that India has produced, yoga, Buddhism, so forth. Then, since that's the case and has been well expressed, hopefully, in words just now, then let's see about these steps that lead to the highest goal. This, as I said yesterday, was a pleasant result or evolution of the black and white version. Turned in, when I colorized it, it came out quite nicely there. I like it very much because out of the Upanishads I drew all the sayings I could find about this inflated nadis, about how a consciousness awakes. Let me just say them to you here. Within the recesses of the heart is the akasha of consciousness, with its many openings, shaped like the calyx of a lotus, in which all the universes exist. The individual soul is as subtle as a hairpoint, divided and subdivided hundreds of times. It's like these nerve networks, the subtle nerve networks of nadis. Another says, in the heart dwells the Atman. There are 101 nerves centered there, and in each one of those are 100 more, and each of these branch into 72,000 nadis. In all of these, the Shakti power flows. The Prajna Upanishad, you can look that up, the shelf in there. So that's why I always say the Upanishads, the Vedanta, always had this beneficial love affair with Tantra. You see, some of these are from the Yoga Kundalini Upanishad, which is an Upanishad that speaks about Kundalini. So you speak about Kundalini, you're usually talking about mother or form, sort of form, and then yet the Upanishads, which stick to the formless, are most of the time are transmitting it to you in that way. And bathe at the most sacred confluence of the holy rivers, found within the precious human body, where the three spiritual nerve channels meet. The three sacred rivers in India have really been named and styled after these three inner currents. They're inner rivers, and the outer rivers are the outer rivers, and those are sacred, and they worship them and bathe in them and so forth. But the inner rivers are the Sushumna and the Ida and the Pingala. In our Western way of thinking, we could call them the Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria. You see, we sail forth on them. You see, to discover new lands. So, however you put it, and it is a bit esoteric and somewhat cryptic, but you can look into the deeper teachings of these systems because they still exist, and there are still teachers who want them to continue. Those four particularly nice sayings. I'll read you one more out of Svetashvatara Upanishad, and we'll finish the quotes in this chart. There in the heart, where all the subtler nerve endings meet, like the spokes of a chariot wheel at the hub, abides the Atman, stationary but coming manifest. Meditate upon that self as Om, and God speed to you in crossing over to the farther shore beyond darkness. So, Svetashvatara Upanishad. Svetashvatara was a great grandsire of rishis. The whole family of rishis' lines came from him, and he came from them. So he has these powerful teachings. Svetashvatara Upanishad, one of the more recent, I think, of the ancient Upanishads, Therefore, it has a lot of those connections in that we need to know in more modern times, with less encumbered by esoteric wordage, and verbiage, and so forth. That you need to know the Sanskrit to penetrate. So I called this chart Lokas, Nadis, and Transmigrations of Souls because it wouldn't necessarily be the subject of somebody who doesn't defer to or refer to the worlds. It wouldn't necessarily be the subject of one who calls himself a strict non-dual or Advaita Vedantist or interested in nirvana only, but it's very important. This cosmology connects you to philosophy, and philosophy and cosmology together connect you to spirituality, fill in the gaps. I can't see any better place to apply that than in America, in the West, in this day and time. Fill in the gaps is necessary because he's been here since 1893. Christ has been here since year one, as it were, Christian era. And where are the seers? Where are the non-dual seers? Meister Eckhart tried it, and they didn't like it in that tradition. So they're saints there, more bhakti-oriented. We're a more bhakti-oriented culture when we go to church once a week to do so. But the ancient non-dual wisdom has not been given to us, nor to our parents, nor to their parents' parents, almost across the board without exception. So to fill in the gaps, we should go back and look at some of these teachings that are of the cosmology and of the philosophy, because America doesn't even have Europe's. I mean, basically we borrowed Greek and Rome philosophy. And that was, just beginning to reach the non-dual by the time Heraclitus and Aristotle and Socrates began to expound what they knew from their own wisdom. Didn't get a chance to fully materialize. Look at our White House. It's Roman columns. So we borrowed architecture and philosophy basically from the Greeks and the Romans. And India didn't find a place there. Neither did Islam. The popes were too busy putting on armor and going to other countries and fighting the infidels, so Islam never had a good relationship with Christianity. But Buddhism has more of a chance of working its way into these countries, and did even in the early days with King Ashoka and so forth, who stopped animal sacrifice and began to be vegetarian and so forth. Started following some of the non-violent precepts of Jainism, which was older than Buddhism, and Buddhism. And in that regard then became the most miraculous phenomena in our history. There were two great happenings in our history, spiritually speaking. One was Buddhism's spread across the entire world without any violence. Religion moving and being accepted by others without violence. What a novel idea, you see. The second is Swami Vivekananda coming to this world in 1893 and convincing thousands of young men and young women to give up the world. No one's ever done that. It's hard to even get one person to give up the world. And the only way we're going to do it here is to convince people to give up the world internally. They're not going to give it up externally. So they have to give it up internally. That's the teaching from Ramakrishna. Monks must be renounced both externally and internally. Householders must be renounced internally. Because it's unreal, nobody gets off the hook. You cannot compromise the non-dual truth in that way. You have to keep those axioms, you see, those pillars that are Indian, not Roman or any other. Non-duality is based upon there is no transformation going on here. That's number one. If you see transformation, you don't accept it as truth. It's called aparinama. If it's parinama, it's not God, because it changes. Rule of thumb, the measure of what non-duality really means, that's the first pillar. If you see change in it, and you must watch it over time, then all the darshanas of India agree at the end. That wasn't it. It's changeless, it's formless, timeless, so forth. And number two, there's no beginning and middle and end, a jati to anything. And if appears there is, then that's Maya working. That's name and form going on. And karma is a result. So you watch that over time and you see people suffer. You say, oh, that must not have been it. Those glittering palaces and pleasure-filled lifetimes and so forth, that must not have been it. It was just a glint. And so that's why Christ told the rich man, leave it behind, follow me. Then I'll know your mettle. So having hopefully not labored that point too much about souls at different levels of consciousness, it's important to know that when you evaluate or assess an enlightened soul, you have to be a jeweler to know the worth of that diamond. You have to have developed some of this in yourself so you can correctly assess it. That's one of Vedanta's best points, is this viveka, which Swamiji named himself after. I'm going to America, look at them, wheat and chaff, so forth and so on. Birds have nests, foxes have holes. I think I'll give him the viveka of Vedanta. Discrimination between what's essential and what's non-essential, or what's real and what's unreal, what's full and what's empty. And both of those teachings are good. You see, yoga, tat yoga slayasam siddhaha, kalenat mani vindate, and so forth. From the Gita, Krishna says, tad vidhi pranipatena pariprasnena sevaya, means the seers have realized the truth about both God and the world, not just about God. So this is where, in America, I'm saying we could pick this cosmology and philosophy up because we don't have one, really. Not an actual one. There have been great thinkers, a few geniuses. Where are our seers? Where are our transcendental, realized souls? Has our culture in America produced even one yet, we ask? So we're all entertaining the thoughts. We're all storming the gates once in a while. Why is it that we're not attaining after so many decades of having this truth back present with it from such a glowing soul? And these great souls fail to change the world because the world is changed. They're not here to change the world. I have not come to bring peace. I've come to bring a sword. So it's the same in all religions with these great beings, and especially their founders, is that they're here to introduce these truths to you to see if you will entertain them and extract yourself from the chaff. Give up those things in the mind that are impediments. Our founder, when I was 25 and he was 34, said, "What do we do then, Lex, with this great? Should we become monks? Should we join the order and so forth?" Well, he already had some children, so that wasn't going to happen. So he said, we must take the mind and we must examine it. And anything we find in the mind that isn't copacetic, that isn't positive and beneficial for our spiritual life, we must take those out, like dark specks out of a piece of paper. That's our practice generally in English, as best as you can say, and it fits the Buddhist and the Vedantist idea of sadhana. It's all in the mind, so you go to the mind to do it. The body, hundreds and thousands of hatha yoga asanas are not going to get you enlightenment. One in the end will help. The breathing exercises, Shankar says your lungs just become a pair of bellows. That's all. And your posture just becomes like a dried up old tree. They're of no use. You start in the mind that produced the body, not in the body that's not connected to the mind. And so when you do that, then you're doing the real sadhana, the real discipline, the inner work. See, we all want to get to the inner work, right? Everyone talks about that. Oh, I want to get to the inner work. I want to transform myself. And the least little obstacle throws us back. You see, oh, that's too hard, I guess. So to get to the inner work is to have faith first that it is in the mind that all these vagaries start. The mind is dual by nature, is the teaching, manas. It's imperfect by nature. Read my lips. or read my books, you see. That means the mind will never be perfect. When the mind is perfect, they call that no mind. And they don't call that for no good reason. So you transcend the intellectual frame of reference, because the intellect is the highest you can go in the mind. It's the most trustworthy thing. It's more trustworthy than your thoughts. It's more trustworthy than the ego. So the threefold or fourfold mind, fivefold if you add in the cosmic mind, that's where you do your work. And then you watch after you do the work there and watch the results out here. I was saying that yesterday. Spiritual life's fruits are so much different than any of the fruits. Say if we're all running after swift results, then you're going to give up spiritual life real soon and leave, see, no matter what the difficulties are. But if you do the spiritual practice according to the tradition, wait and watch, sure enough, your outer life changes too. Those fruits start to come to you. And then you're a rich man. See? And you can make best benefit of them for yourself and for other beings. And it's all about constancy and perseverance. That was her two favorite teachings. So you might not think your meditation was doing anything. 10 years later, my ignorance is gone, utterly gone. And you didn't see it go. You know, it's not like you can... Holy Mother said you get in a train in Calcutta and ride it to Bodh Gaya. See? And on the way you fall asleep so you don't see the countryside pass, but you wake up at your destination. That's how she describes spiritual life and its fruits. So that you do the work and you just like don't know what that work's doing inside of you. Nobody can see that. It's the workings of karma. Has anyone ever known karma? Has anyone ever known Maya? You can't know something that's not real, number one. And when you try, it's just, you talk about the proverbial can of worms. How about a Grand Canyon full of worms that you've opened up? Of connections that are so deep and so ancient and so long and so complex that even to come close to them is, coming close to them is like getting a glimpse of the ocean of suffering, and nobody wants that. He who misery loves and hugs the form of death, to him Kali comes. Swami Vivekananda wrote. So if you have the stomach for it, and that's got to be a very strong stomach, you look right into the ocean of suffering. That's the most sobering view you can get. And most beings will run in fright the other direction and never want to see that again. So it takes a very great soul to see that at the foundation of everything. And I said both Buddha and Ram had that experience, and then they had to be schooled to know that that's ultimately unreal, that there's a transcendental reality that's beyond that. The dancer has to have a stage, so you look for that foundation. The rest of this chart basically is, you see the 7 chakras, which is nicely aligned there, 3 of them falling below the Vishnu Granthi, and the Brahma Granthi is down here. These 3 Granthis, which basically means knot, or veil you might say, is Rudra Granthi here, keep souls in their assigned positions. Assigned means that's what they have available to them for their transmigration process. And a lot of people are just restricted here, you see. Myriad souls wandering in ignorance in this complex called Maya. And below the Brahmagranthi, disembodied spirits, we could call them patalas in Buddhism. There are 7 higher worlds, and then there are 7 lower worlds, both in Buddhism and in Vedanta. Buddhism calls it the scorching, blistering world and the cracking, freezing world, and at least Tibetan Buddhism has these explanations of these lower patalas. Patala means sunken ground, sunken world. And so to get beyond the Brahmagranthi, which is right there at the root chakra, you're going to have to get rid of animalism and jealousy and those kinds of things. There are poisons at all 6 of these centers. there are poisons. Subtler and subtler poisons. And then there are also nectars at all. And there's even a nectar down here at the root chakra. It's called great power. If I could only purify it and awaken it and use it, take the poison out of the snake, and then show it to my friends and scare them, have fun, you see. Take the fangs off too, maybe, so we'll get sued. So up these Bur-Bhuva Swarlokas are said to be in there with this ocean of occult light that people get attracted to for occult powers. There's a whole bunch of teachings like Path of the Moon, I said yesterday, and Path of the Sun. So these are the worlds of return, Sri Krishna says, and they bump up against this Vishnu Granthi right there at the Manipura chakra and cannot penetrate through and fall back into rebirth, and unless they penetrate it with real love. If in this world of so many problems and resistances for even the great souls that come here, if you can either retain or develop a real love, it should be love for divine reality, of course, first. Even in your service of people, you love God in them, right? You don't love the people. If you serve the human as divine, then it begins to become proud. But if you serve the human as divine, then it becomes, begins to think of its own divine nature. So the popular teaching again in the West would be, oh, we're human, isn't that great? No, Vedanta says, you want to transcend your humanity and your human nature and become divine because that's your true nature. So some sentimentalism exists around being human, see. And the real, if you wanted to have any kind of pride or be proud of your humanity, you should probably say something like, this human nature is higher than the gods, because Hinduism teaches that. You're higher than the gods because the gods are within you, and you can fall under their control, as all of these realms have their various overseers, or you can transcend them. And the human being has the ability to do that, because the Atman is within it. Of course the Atman is within the gods too, but they're not into attaining it. They're into being gods. In the same way, the humans are into being humans. So you transcend your human nature and you realize your divine nature. It's going to demand that you go beyond the intellectual frame of reference, my teacher often repeated, and transcend theology, science, get some cosmology going, understand non-dual philosophy, and then realize the truth. And then the truth will set you free. So this is a good reading of everything that's below the Vishnu Granthi. Souls that penetrate this and reach the heart chakra, their next stepping stone or block would be the Rudra Granthi. It would be between the third eye and the Sahasrara. It's very difficult to go into non-dual samadhi. The lower samadhis are more attainable to beings at these levels of the lower chakras. And you can see various, you can go back and look at this chart. You can even get one for yourself. They're now available. And you see that a lot of these passageways lead to the realms of the gods. These are some of these vyahritis, or connections, that Saint Seers made. It looks like there's only the Burloka to people attached to physical matter, right? They don't know about the realm of the elementals and the realm of the ancestors yet. If science could work that in, then they wouldn't be just physicists anymore, they'd be metaphysicists. And then they'd have an idea of what the three worlds is really about, and has been about for thousands of years, really thousands of cycles. Funny that you came from that realm and you don't know about it. That's the sort of dichotomy of it. If you penetrate the Vishnu Granthi, then you can see Maharloka, Jnanaloka, Taparloka, Brahmaloka. All these four worlds are in this ocean of consciousness. You see, it's not just an ocean of occult light that you're seeking power and money and fame and all that, but you're actually in a much
you call ocean of wisdom. Ecstatic souls sporting in consciousness in an ocean of sorrowless light. Ocean of sorrowless light was an expression used by Patanjali, father of yoga. He calls it one of the 7 ways of realizing Brahman is to meditate upon Brahman as an ocean of sorrowless light. Dotish Mata, I think he calls it in the Yoga Sutras. Kaivalya Pragbara going inward and Samsara Pragbara going outward, an ancient teaching from Samkhya. Lord Kapila said there are millions of souls coursing along this river of delusion and ignorance, ocean of suffering, and they're caught pretty much in this area of the 3 lower chakras, 3 lower worlds. But some beings get on the Kaivalya Pragbara. Kaivalya means isolation from nature, because nature produces form. So you isolate yourself from form and the 5 elements, not only at the physical level, but at the mental level. And then you go beyond that. You might remember what I just said about samadhana being the ability to concentrate on Brahman alone. So if you're still concentrating on these worlds and the blisses that comes from them, you're not yet concentrating on Brahman alone to the exclusion of everything else. So that ability is very rare, and it will help you penetrate the Rudra Granthi. There's the avatar poised right there, you see. And then here's, of course, the 7th chakra, crown chakra. And this is the taking on of form over here, that you enter the worlds, and this is the giving up of form, as you enter these levels of consciousness. The worlds disappear and there's only the soul left, like the Mahatmas, the great souls, the Nityasiddhas, the eternal perfect beings, like Vivekananda, and the Videhamuktis, who see this world once and say, I'm gone and gone forever, I'm not coming back. Possible that Christ was even one of those. So, you interested in the highest worlds? Then here's the highest world, called Vaikuntha, where Vishnu resides, and Kailas, where Shiva resides, and Manidvipa is the name of Mother's realm. Manidvipa is the jewel island of essence. And you'll have to give up your male form to enter there, evidently, according to the scriptures. If you follow Mother Kali, who is at the foundation of all this, beautiful image of her with holding the sword of non-duality and so forth, then that will be the last vestige of form that you will encounter. It's rather like the Brahmaloka, you see, for the aspiring soul who wants to get beyond the 7 worlds and enter into formless reality, which is again indescribable, but is knowable by the pure mind. Otherwise, we wouldn't have descriptions of it. Path of the sun is all that. Path of the sun means they're not necessarily going to reach the highest goal, but they're not going to descend back into the lower 3 worlds anymore. So, I'm gone and gone forever could mean to a realized soul, I'm going to hold a subtle body here, and with it I will get back into the world. Say Dalai Lama or Kala Rinpoche, teachers I learned from in Tibetan Buddhism, they are holding subtle bodies. They're not giving everything up into the Buddha light or into the ocean of consciousness, but they will keep a subtle form. Sit, like Holy Mother said about Vivekananda, sit in meditation for 700 years at a time and then come back in another age. If you could interpret another age as being some 500 years, that would be a very liberal way of interpreting or describing another age. Really, another age means hundreds and thousands of years in the tradition. Kali Yuga, I think it's like 400. They have different reckonings of it, but there's like ages are 456,000 years long, and the next age is twice that, and the next age is 4 times that, and then the next age is 8 times that. So you've got the Satya, Treta, Dvapara, and Kali Yugas exponentially expanding like that in this illusion of time.
And that's one Mahayuga, and that passes. There's some 16 Mahayugas in one day of Lord Brahma's life. And one night also has that many. So there's a soul presiding over that length of time. And beings are coming and going in cycles all the time. And so, of course, it's all the blink of an eye, they say, too. Like your deep sleep last night. You might have been in it for 3 or 4 hours, and it could have just been a second or 10 seconds you were in it. So when time is really illusory like that and it goes away, then it really loses its sense of linear expansion and just becomes one eternal moment. And you wake in it and sleep in it, as the case may be. There is a kind of going to sleep in these higher worlds, a resting that happens there too. That kind of sleep would be necessary for you to wake up in a womb, protect a body and wake up in a womb, in a womb as a fetus. So you have to, as if, close your eyes and move. And yes, for the non-dualists who have heard that transformation is not real and change is not real and only non-duality exists, this is a dream. But what a magnificent dream it is of Lord Brahma. See, in Brahmaloka, what a magnificent dream it is, that it contains all those subtle worlds, causal worlds, gross worlds, millions of myriad souls, some of them wandering in ignorance in these 3 lower levels, and others enjoying great bliss and playing in the fields of the Lord. I mean, that phrase in Christianity would apply here, playing in the fields of the Lord. Down here, you take that with a grain of salt. Play for a while, and then suffer for a while. Play for a while, then suffer for a while. You can't get out of that here. In this very sloka here, it's said, within the recess of the heart is the akasha of consciousness, with its many openings shaped like the calyx of a lotus, to which all the universe exists, in which all the universes exist. So they didn't just choose the lotus out of nowhere. When you see some of these inner chakras and these inner worlds, the shape that is the appearance to the inner eye is that of that calyx of a lotus. So the only thing you can describe it with is something that you're familiar with back on Earth. So it's not like the lotus got chosen among all other flowers just because it was pretty or because water rolled off its leaf. A dewdrop rolled off its leaf and didn't a tear. Those all came later, but the actual view of what these are like inwardly to the inner eye appears this way, and they're colors, subtle colors, there too that the inner eye sees. Anyway, I bring it up because here you see a sign there, the Gyan Akasha. That is this Akasha of consciousness, basically. It's an Akasha, it's a Akasha space of highest intelligence, not intellect that's reserved into a sheath or a sharira or a kosha, but an expansive mother wisdom that we were talking about yesterday morning that's there in every word. It has to be there in every word because words are what turn into worlds. They're called bhuvanas. There are 6 ways. Sadakya, it's called in Tantra, that Brahmagyan, that Brahman becomes manifest in the world. One of those is it starts out with subtle things like vak, word, and then eventually it will become bhuvanas, a whole set of worlds. And kalas and kala are there. There's expanses of time and things that happen and connect with each other in time are also a part of that. It's a very beautiful system, and we have a chart on it, of course. I think that one sloka we did, number 46, and this one chart we took coming off of the mentions of the Walker of the Skies and so forth, is enough for the first half. So here, let's take our break for 15 minutes. Live streaming audience can rejoin us, and we will come back for another hour of this Sunday class on the Adhyatma Upanishad. Mahalo, as we say, for your kind attention. He's back, and so are all of you. So we have returned for the second half of this second class in Portland in May, and it's all around the Adhyatma Upanishad, and we finished slokas 45 only, and 46 relates this. Actually we did 46 too, but 47 relates this: whose attitude is the same both when he is honored by the virtuous and when he is persecuted by the wicked, is liberated in life. So no praise or blame can be where praise or praised and blame or blamed are one, as Vivekananda said in his Song of the Sannyasin. Heed no more how body lives and goes. Its task is done. Let karma float it down. Let one put garlands on, another kick this frame. Say not. For no praise or praise can be where praise or praised and blame or blamed are one. Thus be thou calm. So that equanimity, as spoken of by Swami Vivekananda, is also there in the Bhagavad Gita. Sri Krishna is talking about a man or a woman of steady consciousness, sthiti pragnasya. It's based in this wisdom, and so that wisdom is eternal, and the world has sprung from it. The mind that knows that wisdom, its world is pure and perfect and precious, and otherwise it's fraught with suffering and changes. So that knowledge needs to be in between layer of Brahman and soul. Needs to be there, sort of sandwiched in there, like a chit sandwich, maybe you could say. So sorry. And that means consciousness has to be in between that layer as intelligence. So nothing really to say about that sloka, except that's one of the requisites of being liberated in life. 48 says, that one who has realized the truth of Brahman no longer transmigrates. If he believes he does, this truth has not been realized by him. He is but an extrovert. Nice neutral word for materialists, worldly people. They're extroverts. The senses go outward only, Upanishad says, and therefore they're defective by nature, because they go outward. But there are subtle senses inside of you, like dream senses, that by which you can move inward. But you'll have to take these dream senses and the dream elements, the tanmatras, seriously. If they're not in your ideology, then they might as well not exist. And so you're missing a couple of those steps that you move back inside by. But if you place them in there, in the thinking process, then you meditate, you all of a sudden you see them appear there. It's just like creating Ishvara in your head, a vision of God in your heart. You know, there's a temple, I'm walking towards it, the door's open, on the raised deity is Sri Ramakrishna on a 1,000-petaled lotus. I approach him, I bow down, we sit, we meditate together. It's something you have to build in your mind. Everything is in your mind, and that takes on double or triple meaning in yoga psychology. Yes, literally it's in your mind. We don't mean as a figment, we mean as a constructible reality that has a foundation behind it that's indestructible. So if you have that as you're in your mind's eye, then your mind can dance in that realm, can move in that realm. And yes, you also know that it's an apparent movement, because Brahman doesn't move. It's always stable, stationary. Ara eva ratanabal samhatra yatra nadyaha sa ish onshas tarate buhuda jaya manaha, as we chant sometimes in our svadhyaya practice. Basically, there in the heart, where all the subtle nerve endings meet, like the spokes of a chariot wheel in the hub, abides the Atman, stationary, but becoming manifold. Becoming means it seems to become different than what it is, or multiple instead of one. So that's to be meditated upon and realized. So back to the idea of having a vision of that in your head, in your mind's eye.
then you have a safe place to go where peace of mind exists. You can retreat from the world, and you need peace of mind first and foremost. So that's going to be your abode, your refuge. Like Ram Prasad's song, it says, "O mind, go to the most remote pilgrimage place, even deeper and further than that on the Himalayan peaks. Go to that meeting of three rivers, those three sacred rivers inside of you, the confluence of the Ganga and the Saraswati and the Yamuna and so forth, and go on pilgrimage there. Meditate on your own consciousness. So all of that has to be envisioned. Yesterday's imagination is today's envisionment. Today's envisionment is tomorrow's realization. Paraphrasing my teacher. So these are, if it's all in the mind, then you have to use the mind. So I'm saying all this around inserting the idea of the tanmatras into your thinking process. They're not there if you don't bring them in. As soon as you bring them in, they begin to appear. And that's also what happens in emptiness. You're supposed to sit in emptiness. The higher Buddhist teachings and the higher Vedanta teachings tell you this. Emptiness is not the ultimate goal. That when you sit in emptiness for a while, it means empty of all things that aren't Brahman, empty of all things that bother you, empty of all distractions, that kind of emptiness. And in that emptiness, that formlessness, divine forms begin to appear. And those are eternal structures, like icebergs that have crystallized in the ocean of consciousness, and that's getting to the Father through the Son. But you have to visualize them first, because you only believe in them, but you don't have faith in them yet. Beyond mere belief is faith. So that's all a matter of the individual mind strengthening itself, inflating the nadis, as it was saying. That's one way of putting it. So we looked at this as coursing through the six worlds, a sort of mock transmigration that's going on. It's not really true, it's a dream life, gross and subtle and causal. So you're going to penetrate through that final veil and have the non-dual experience, which you should. It behooves every soul to have that experience, whether they return or not, because it then fills in all those gaps and doubt, and removes all doubts, final doubts. Doubts die hard, even into the highest level of realization. Doubts persist, they say. Thought of mortality persists, even in the one who has trained himself to think about immortality as a soul as being immortal. So in that regard, and because I promised it, I think 2 or 3 times over the last 6 months of live streaming, I've put up the 10 Pure Lands of Buddhism after I colorized it before I left Hawaii. So that's another way of thinking of lands that are higher and deeper, that still have a semblance of form, but it also brings the soul more specifically and directly into the process. Here you're talking about avenues and worlds and gods and so forth, the soul that transmigrates, but here a soul that's through with that kind of transmigration, and Lord Vashishta has a version of this too, the 7 levels of higher knowledge and the 7 levels of lower knowledge, it's called. So they look at all of these realms as made of knowledge. They're made of intelligence. And here, they're filled with particles of intelligence, just like this world is filled with particles of matter. So it's just a step towards the subtle and causal realms, which are your own inner bodies that you're taking. And it's becoming more apparent to you and clear to you as you envision them and move into them. You inflate those nadis and you bring Chit Shakti into them. And then pretty soon you're a walker of the skies. Or you can move about these worlds free of access, even in this very body. You can dance in your own mind, as I was saying yesterday. So if we were to look at a teaching from one of the Buddhist schools, you'd see this 10 Pure Lands as a very beautiful teaching, because it's really 10 stages of enlightenment. I mean, because you reach the first Pure Land as a bodhisattva, then pretty much you're done with transmigration in ignorance. If you transmigrate at all, you know it to be apparent only, not actual, not real. So you're always in one place, and you're projecting, consciousness through these worlds. It's sankalpa, but it's atmic sankalpa. It's not mayic sankalpa anymore. Sankalpa is a very important word in Sanskrit that we need to understand, mental projection. When we do, we'll replace the word creation with it. It's projection of the mind, not creation out of nothing. And then the soul doesn't, we have answers for why the soul is not there, and all of a sudden it's there. It's not created out of dust. It's actually a-create, a word that Vivekananda used for it. You can't create a soul. The soul is what's behind all this. It is Brahman. It's just in a state with limiting adjuncts around it. Those are called koshas, and there are 5 of them, just like so many other cosmic teachings. Body, energy, mind, intellect, and ego, the 5 sheaths, the Adara system of India, so ancient. You strip those sheaths off to get to the Atman that's permeating them all and is also contained inside of them, like a beautiful diamond contained inside box and wrappings and Easter egg stuff and ribbon and tape and all that. Take off those 5 sheathings. There it is, shining forth as your very own self. When that is seen, then you've seen the truth, and if you can hold the truth, then you are not all of a sudden magically or suddenly enlightened, fully enlightened. It's one thing that has plagued us as sincere seekers after these truths in the West, and probably for centuries, people, is that what's the difference between full enlightenment and gradual enlightenment? They call it krama mukti. You get enlightenment by stages, and it's not preferred by the seers, but it's nevertheless needs to be admitted. That it's again an apparent transformation going on. Krama mukti as compared to jivan mukta, all of a sudden you're completely free. As compared to sarva mukti, everyone's free all the time. So you can look into this. People projecting, so they're projecting things that are masks over their own true nature. And some of these people are doing this on purpose. To tear off the mask is all fun. And other people, that's called leela or sport. I think I'll pretend myself to be other than God, and then I'll realize it in the next lifetime. Won't that be fun? See? And avatars are beings that Mother has do that in front of thousands of people, not just a couple, like a household saint or something. You see. So you could say, krama mukti, then gradual enlightenment, you see. And then jivan mukta, you hit that place where you're free in life, in the body, and then you're working still. So that cusp where you're working between jivan mukta and sarva mukta, that you realize freedom for all time, is described well by systems like Vishishta's 7 higher levels of knowledge. There's Saptabhumikas, they're called, or these Dasabhumikas of Buddhism. India's always played off of each other. Vishishta's yoga being far more ancient than Buddha's noble truths. So they back and forth with each other all the time, sharing this wisdom and reformatting it and putting it into different ways of understanding for the times and for the consciousness that's there. If you have fishermen for your disciples, you have to put it in a certain way. Maybe go back to the old Jewish scriptures and talk about the castles, the 7 mansions or whatever. Or if you're doing it in India with Shankara's disciples, he has to do it in terms of Advaita Vedanta and bring in some Kundalini Shakti into it, because he, his teacher, and his teacher's teacher, that is Shankara, Govindapada and Gaudapada, were all Samayachara Tantrasists. At the same time, they were Advaita Vedantists. A lot of people don't know that. They worship Shiva. They're Shaivites. And non-dualism has a very powerful place in Shaivism. But Shaivism is also based on 32 tattvas that was borrowed from the 16 tattva system, 24 tattva system of Kapila, who's even more ancient. So they all play and borrow from each other, and these systems expand and contract, simplify and complex. So you get something like the 37 limbs of enlightenment in Buddhism. That's like this vast thing you look into, which has subdivisions. And describes the dynamics of the soul that moves in consciousness. So with that as a preamble, so to speak, let's look at this first land. Let's go through them. This tanka behind this is the 10 pure lands represented. If you get an image of it without the text, you'll see it depicted for the eyes. But these are Dharma charts, Dharma art wisdom charts. So I wanted to have the beauty of Dharmic art there. At the same time, then the New Age is here upon us, as it were, the new dispensation of Ramakrishna. We want to have these on the wall, not just to please the eye and then go away with some vision of that, or maybe forget it, but actually sit there and study it in context with the image or the deities or the Dharma teachings. Let's make an amalgam of those and see if it sticks better. Because we want to be in the Gyanakasha all the time, at least, in the Dharma. If we fall lower than that, we risk adharma and agyana, ignorance and going against the Dharma. A land of joy is first. Pramudita Bhumi. Prema mudita manase kaho Rama Rama Rama. I think of when I think of mudita. It's this joy, this beautiful joy that comes. And so there you see the 3 bullet points. That soul who is a bodhisattva, who attains the first stage of bodhisattvahood, and he has to better himself or herself over 9 stages, on 9 more stages. So you see, this is an enlightened soul. Is that the end of it? Is that full enlightenment? If you ask Ramakrishna, he said, don't call me these things. Don't call me father. Don't call me guru. And don't call me master. Because those words prick my flesh. He says, why? Because there is no end to spiritual enlightenment. There's no end to Mother's wisdom and Mother's beauty and Mother's worlds. And there's no end to anything. It's all eternal. Existence is. Probably, I used to say that, start out with some sloka, and then they'd slim that down to 4 or 5 words, and they'd slim that down to 3, and finally down to 2, and finally, well, how can we make it even more simple for you? Sarvosmi. Everything is. It's like sarva moksha or sarva mukti. To get this idea across in the straightest and most direct possible way that all of this is Brahman, that takes 5 words, or 3 in Sanskrit. And you also are Brahman, that takes 2 words, aham brahmasmi, or that thou art, 3 words. So it's kind of a proving point again of how Mother's wisdom exists in words. A whole book will give you a plethora of those thoughts and words and ideas and everything. What to speak of a library full of books, but that's going out in the Western way of thinking, education, but if you go inward toward less and less words, until finally spending my time in meditation, silence revealed a revelation. So pretty soon you become silent. When the pitcher's full, it doesn't gurgle anymore. And in that silence you perceive this truth without words. But it's all a step-in process. This is all a step-down process. Or I call it, scattering of mind. But a collection of mind and then a focusing of mind in an involutionary way, in both terms of the soul returning to its source or philosophy becoming more and more condensed till it becomes just a word, the word, in the beginning. that was with God, then that's a reversal of that whole process. We don't know a lot about the dynamics of that reversal, which is what cosmology and philosophy should be doing for us. So that world is, that level is full spiritual awakening takes place. The Bodhisattva vow is taken. The vow of Dhamma, generosity, is accepted. And that soul wishes for karmic merit. His wishes for karmic merit are renounced. So Papa and Punya sort of stops there. And you want to get beyond good and bad, pleasure and pain, virtue and vice, and so forth. Because if you entertain one, the Master said, the other's going to be there, just by a matter of course. So you're transcending dvandva mohena, deluding pairs of opposites. And you're going to this, getting training and being at this non-dual stage. Egotistic pursuits and all dharmas are perceived to be empty. That's a classic teaching in Buddhism, and it could certainly put you off, because first you find out the world is empty by learning the Dharma, and then they tell you, well, guess what, the Dharma is also empty. I think it's a different quality of emptiness you're talking about there, as I just described when you're in meditation and emptiness happens to you, and then you stay long enough in emptiness and you find these divine forms congealing, and you're just working your way inward, inward, inward. You're still playing in the fields of the Lord a bit, or maybe you're coming back to help souls who are in the fields of the Lord. And in fact, these 7 lokas, they say Brahma lokas, the great soul there, the great rishi, the highest of the Saptarishis, is helping beings there go formless. They still have a little desire for form. And I remember it was described to me by one Swami once as living on the beach in a hut. Beautiful beach, the blue ocean. You go in every day and you begin to spend more of your time in the water, and at night you come back and get into the hut. So that's what giving up form at the Brahmaloka level is like, and there's some soul there that's telling you it's okay. One of these days, you stay out in the ocean if you want. You can vacate the hut of form, and you can be formless, which is your true nature. But there's still some vestige of desire for that, and that should be understandable to all of us who sometimes fear death and maybe even fear going to sleep, or don't understand our deep sleep state, which is really a kind of practice for formlessness. Everyone's a perfect meditator every night. I salute you all. You're the advanced contemplatives, because you go into the formless state every night with the least little effort. Then you come out and try and meditate. Oh, this is hard, you see. So that mind has to be changed in that regard. A, U, M of Om have to be connected. If they're left separate, then the soul wanders in the 3 worlds of waking, dreaming, and deep sleep. And it doesn't even know any of those worlds that it wanders in, not even the waking state. So you imagine living in a body a whole lifetime and not knowing your own waking state, what it is. So connecting the waking to the dreaming to the deep sleep is the 3 levels of your consciousness, and then Turiya is the 4th, they call it, which just means the 4th. They wanted to make it that simple for you. There's one of those systems which is just using 3 words. Jagrat, Swapna, Sushupti, Turiya is a whole system that if you say it to a person who's been grounded in philosophy, they go into samadhi right there. You could walk up to a child and go boo, and they get scared. You could walk up to Sri Krishna and go Brahman, and he goes into samadhi. Is that open to suggestion? In fact, you didn't even need to say Brahman. You could say broom. Replace Brahman with broom. You know the story about him going to samadhi when he saw a man sweeping? It's because they asked him later when he came out of samadhi, what was so much divine about that guy sweeping a dirty floor that put you into the highest samadhi for several hours? He said, well, I saw the broom and I saw the straw. I knew that straw was grass grown in Navadvip near Chaitanya's birthplace. The minute I thought of Chaitanya, I went into samadhi. You see? Talk about open to suggestion, to spiritual suggestion, how sensitive the mind is. And it's going to have to ponder Brahman more and more to be that sensitive. If it ponders the world, it's as if the Atman doesn't exist. And there's plenty of proof of that out there. What you're studying here and your belief and your faith doesn't exist outside this door at all to others. Some of them are absolute ignorance of it, some of them are absolutely against it. And some of those who are absolutely against it aren't just the members of fundamental religious sects. They're also very intelligent scientists. Just look online and see what a time Deepak Chopra is having trying to argue with the scientists of the West. He's not having much fun. So this is not a matter of mere belief then. It has to be checked and verified like any science. And these are the scientific systems you use. This one just happens to be one that's a rare example of a higher, excuse the word, evolution of the soul. In this case, a higher involution. But even that word beggars the point. So that first land, you can see what joy is there when those things are gotten rid of. That is a real emptiness there. Getting rid of egotism and adharmic things and not worrying about merit and demerit anymore. The soul doesn't have merit and demerit. It doesn't have good and bad. The mind has those. So you're beginning to get these pure lands which are pure mind. And pure mind is Buddha nature. Pure mind is God. Both Sri Ramakrishna and Buddha said that. Prabhakari Bhumi is the land of radiance. There, the Bodhisattva in his second stage attains the stages of absorption, attains the 4 stages of formlessness, and acquires 5 or 6 of the supernatural powers called ruddhis. So you can see the arrow there pointing across to the 4 stages of absorption. Akushala, vichara, vitarka, relinquishing desires via conceptualization and discursive thought. What does it sound like? Patanjali's yoga. Patanjali was very influenced by Lord Buddha, as everyone should be. He was just an Indian, can't call him an avatar in that tradition, you might offend, but he's just a free soul. The Buddha, he was awakened. So that describes perfectly the first seated wisdom samadhis of yoga, vitarka and vichara. So that's one stage of absorption. 2 is thought dissolves to promote inner calm and one-pointedness. First it's knowledge inward and outward, then thought dissolves, so no knowledge. And it's just there, poised in its own realization of the non-dual nature of consciousness. Equanimity, upeksha, alertness, awareness, and well-being then manifest, followed by eternal awakeness or abidance. You hear that expressed in Buddhism a lot. Our founder, Lex Sixon, my great companion, said, that's yogic insomnia you're talking about there. That's yogic insomnia. He says, I have that, yogic insomnia. Swami Sheshananda has that, he pointed. I have a chart on those 4 stages of absorption. It's also been colorized, but we work our way through these lands first. Did I actually skip one, didn't I? I went to 3 from 1. Let's go back because we aren't quite qualified yet for Prabhakari Bhumi. So let's step back to number 2 and make sure that we're fully there. Vimala Bhumi, land of purity. Shila, spiritual discipline, is perfected in that land. Practice of dhyan and samadhi are intensified. That's the 7th and 8th limbs of yoga. Buddhism and yoga is so much close to each other. And Advaita Vedanta is so close to yoga too. These are systems that are more current. These are India's current systems. 550 BC, 140 AD, and 700 AD. These are current for India. That's not long ago. That's not ancient to them. These are the current lights that came on the scene. And in between Shankara and Ramakrishna, there was Chaitanya and So every 500 or so years, they say. And that's kind of an age, if you interpret it that way. These great lights come. Archishmati Bhumi is the fourth land. We did the third. Burns away all false conceptions. Begins to develop non-dual wisdom. It was there before in samadhi by experiences off and on, running hot and cold. There and gone, you say. Here today, gone to Maui, we say in Hawaii. But now it's coming full on. You're beginning to develop the actual non-dual wisdom itself. It's beginning to adhere. Achieves right exertion and works on the 37 limbs of enlightenment. So you could see what the death of ignorance is here. Back before stage one, your ignorance died, and then you could enter into these higher lands, just like you could enter into the higher heavens if you attained real love. So these are the passwords and the backstage passes, you see, that these officials hand out to you, these spiritual officials. Go to Ganesha. Can I go to that next land? What's the mantra? You see. Do you have any friends in higher places there? You get let back in backstage, you see. The background stage of consciousness. Working on the 37 limbs of enlightenment, I have not yet made that chart. I have to figure out how to get all that on an 8 by 11 and or truncate it somehow. That's something I've meant to do. Around that time, I did make a chart on Arupa Samadhi, the 4 stages of formlessness there across the board. About there, there's the stage of limitless space that comes in. I mean, I think that when Einstein transcended the Newtonian laws, that had been there for centuries, that he was beginning to entertain the idea of limitless space. It was only yet there on the physical level, but I think the potential is there for it to expand into these bhumikas or these lokas or these nadis, these akashas. There are different words in Sanskrit that when you hear them, immediately suggests something subtle. India is all about this subtle, not about the gross. The gross is just an outer manifestation, and it all points inward. Every object points you inward, saying, I'm Brahman, but find my source, find my source. Every river flowing from a source. That's why you go up it, not to discover a new land, but to rediscover the inner land of your own awareness. And then number 2 stages, the stage of boundless awareness. Limitless space first, akashas, if you were, the realization that there are kingdoms of heaven within, if you want to put it that way, and then that it's all permeated with boundless awareness, a pure, indivisible state of pure conscious awareness, all pervasive, not separated by space. That's why infinite space has to set it up, then infinite consciousness that is permeating it all, like sweetness in sugarcane juice, Sri Ramakrishna used to say. And this is, again, another kind of envisioning, isn't it? It's a deeper, you're breaching the formless. So before you were formulating the idea of Ishvara or Ishvari in your mind, it was inspiring you, and then you wanted to get to the mother through the daughter, you see. So then you ask her, give me the formless experience, and she says you have to frequent holy company for that. And so you frequent holy company, and at that time then you start building a vision of the formless inside of you, in stages like that, just like you build form in stages. And so there's going to be the equivalence of air, earth, fire, water, and ether there. Ether is space. So you would never be able to understand the higher bhumis and what you're entering into if you didn't put between gross elements and these very, very causal elements, the subtle elements that you pass through to get there. See? These are called tanmatras, and we're not thinking of them. Therefore, our dream state is disconnected from our waking state. And it's one of our big problems. Put it philosophically, one of our big problems. We call it Bhranti Darshana, deluded seeing, unclear seeing. Philosophically speaking, it's a specifically philosophical barrier. So, Darshana means to see, Bhranti means delusion. So we want to have khyati instead, clarity. We want to clear up, like Andrew's tea clears up the throat. Thank you. You notice I'm not coughing this half. Stage of nothingness. And beyond the stage beyond aware and unaware. Words fail, basically, especially English. But English might be one of the better languages on record now to describe some of this, but sometimes they say that it's a stage of nothingness and then the stage of nothing whatsoever. So they're trying to get you to understand that the soul as the separate seer has to have a way of identifying these and moving through them until it realizes that there is no seer and seen. And so there are stages to that subtle process that we're very fortunate to have described by these beings who did have nirvana, like Buddha, or did have nirvikalpa samadhi, like Ramakrishna, or who did have a sampragyata samadhi, like Patanjali, and who did have nirvikalpa, like Gaudapada, who will study up the gorge next weekend. That's the 4 stages of formlessness and the 4 stages of absorption. So the idea, as I've often said, is that if you put a sugar cube in 2, it'll break in 2 chunks, and then 4 and 6, and finally granules. And that's how Sri Ramakrishna described it. You've got this one indivisible mass of sweet liquid now, which is your consciousness. But stages of formlessness happen in those kinds of breaks of the sugar cube. Your conditioned consciousness is going to have to be unconditioned and broke down. There's a chain called the 9 Nidanas. Have you heard of that teaching in Buddhism? The 9 links. I have a chart on it where it's just a chain, and each one of those 9 links is connected to 3 lifetimes, which is going to take you to snap those links. And many of them are conditionings from upbringing, society, past lifetimes, karma, samskaras, all right there. Desire, Trishna is one of them. So it's another Buddhist school that put that really beautiful teaching out. And actually Buddha talked about it. Really the 3 great philosophies in Buddhism, or the 3 great systems are, Ashtakamarga, Ashtangakamarga, and then this one's called, there's one called Praticca Samudpata, the interconnectedness of all things. And then there's these 9 Nidanas that he taught. These, if you want to become a Buddhist, first you have to accept the 4 Noble Truths. I don't know how many of the Hollywood Buddhists have done that, actually. Because the first one is a jump already. First Noble Truth, there is suffering. And then there's a cause for it and a way to get beyond it. And then the Eightfold Path is there, the Ashtanga Marga is the 4th Noble Truth. And Buddha laid it out so beautifully, and stages 3, 4, and 5 come before 1 and 2. That's the interesting thing about this teaching, because it happens to do with your past lifetimes. You're going to your past lifetime to take care of things that should be in order, but you're going out of order so that you can come back to the present lifetime and put it all in order. So they describe those 3 lifetimes of awakening in that way. It's very interesting and different than what the Western consciousness would like to see in order. It's to kind of start breaking out its thinking process. So 4 stages of absorption: akushala, vichara, vitarka, so forth. Akushala, of course, those are like there are 4 of them or something. Hatred and violence and things like that have to be eradicated. And here we have very similar, like Patanjali's yoga. The very first practice in yoga is ahimsa. You can't go on with yoga if you haven't mastered ahimsa, if you're violent in the least little way. Or you can go on with it and take care of it later, but it has to be dealt with. Nonviolence is like right off the top, the first yama. And And truthfulness is second, satyam, which means not just being truthfully morally, but knowing the truth that's going to set you free eventually. These are early practices. They're foundational, and you can't just skip them and jump to asana or pranayama without taking care of these 10. In the same way, you can't just skip hatred and violence and greed and all of those akushalas and think that you're going to get into formlessness for all times. There's a brick on your tail, Sri Ramakrishna said, like the mongoose has a brick tied to its tail. Mm-hmm. And the kids have done that, you see, because they know it'll get away, but it has to come down out of its hole with that weight. And that's karma on the soul's tail. It has to come down out of this realm to get and find itself with a new mantra. Wah, wah, wah. Instead of saying who, it's saying wah, wah, wah. You should be born into every life then with this mumukshutvam, this strong desire to realize God. Because there are 5 types of yogis, 3 miss the goal. That's how Vedavyas puts it. The 3 that miss the goal are the ones that take intoxicants. Welcome to potland, by the way. The ones that take intoxicants, the ones who, or intoxicants means also medicines and, elixirs and things. And then there's the one that is born with a desire to realize God, but doesn't do it, doesn't follow through. And then there's the one, ironically enough, that uses the mantra, also doesn't reach the goal. Because the mantra, as Holy Mother said, is not the end-all and be-all of spiritual life. It's a practice that will purify the mind, that will lead you to the goal. You're already that, but the mind doesn't know it, so you have to remove the impurities, and then you'll be that, as I chanted this morning when I opened up. When those mental impurities dissolve, then the seer sees it. It was always there, he was always it, but the impurities got in the way, and the impurities are where? In the mind, not in the soul. So you find them and root them out, like the ankushalas. This way, you may be in these stages of 8 limbs of yoga or 10 pure lands already, and filling in gaps that will make you aware of it later. It's not like it's all figured like this, like on a sheet of paper. Each soul has its qualifications that it's working on, and this happens to be a soul whose ignorance has died. You might say, ask yourself that question since you've been coming to Vedanta. Has my ignorance died? You can say, well, my karma hasn't yet. My samskars are still there in part. But yeah, my ignorance is I believe this. This is my faith. This is my path. I believe what the seers tell me. So you could say my ignorance has died. Now I have to work on these subtler parts that are keeping me from my third eye from being open. I mean, you can be at the heart, love God. We know many pure, simple, salt-of-the-earth people who do, but they're not getting anything beyond salvation yet. In fact, there are grunties that are keeping them from doing that in mass. The ancestors are in mass thinking that heaven is real. People here on earth are in mass thinking that the earth is real. They're not thinking it's empty. They're thinking it's their oyster. But all the great souls said otherwise. And it's not just in India that they said that. Then comes, did we finish? Yes, we did. Number 5. We'll probably make it through this, and I promised you would for months. So you're seeing the color version of this. Adimukhi, Bhumi, wisdom land view. Wisdom land view. So far we've had the land of purity, land of radiance, blazing land, the hard to conquer land. In the hard to conquer land, meditates to realize the 4 noble truths. Works on the 37 limbs of enlightenment like was doing in stage 4. Continues that. And destroys all doubts. I told you doubt just goes away at a very, very late stage. I like the teaching actually around that because you say, well, if my ignorance is gone, why am I still doubting? But I like the teaching that Ramakrishna gives about that. When people complained to him about it, he said, Well, you must consider them like burnt rope. Your mind has entertained them for lifetimes. You get rid of, actually, the effects of them. The cause to them persists like burnt ropes. You said you can blow on it, and the burnt rope falls apart, right? So these are wisps in your mind that are coming back, suggesting that you are bound, suggesting that you still have ignorance, suggesting that you're still a sinner, suggesting whatever that you've entertained for so long. And they're mere nothings, Holy Mother said. If you're a devotee of God, the more these come and go for you, the better. Because one of these days you're going to say, you're going to exercise the power of breath in the most subtle way and blow that so-called presence, that ash-like presence. You're going to blow it away. See? And then you'll be free of that doubt. See? So right now, in this level, it's a doubt that's not really damning or harming like it is inside of the Rudra Granthi, especially at the Brahma Granthi level. Then 6, which I almost skipped 5, but we got to it. Then 6 is gains insight into conditioned arising. That's this pratitya samutpata I talked about. Yesterday I told you about the master grabbing a piece of the hyacinth or whatever it was on the top of the lake and pulling the strand, and the whole plant comes across the lake. He said, that's like everything connected under the surface that we don't see. It's like the bulk of the iceberg. But the bulk of the iceberg is talking about cosmic principles, but you are there in those cosmic principles. Those are your principles. So your karmas are also there. And if you explore them, you'll be able to get to those grains of sand, remove them from your bed, so you can get a good night's sleep for a change. That's Nidra Samadhi. They call it sleep Samadhi. Immediate comment on that. The conditioned arising is a very major system. Interconnected arising. They have different names for it, and again, based a lot on those 9 links. You have to study those to understand that. I think the beautiful teaching about it, and I always jump to the chase here, and I'm sorry, is that at the highest of all levels, and both Buddha and Patanjali agree on this, is that you have to divorce yourself from nature, from the desire for nature, and that's not a popular teaching in any age, especially here in America in this 3rd millennia, but it's nevertheless Kaivalya, there it is. It's a stream of isolation. I mean, you get free because you isolate yourself from everything that produces form. And it's very esoteric, but at the same time, that's what happens to these souls that puts them into the samadhi that you can't understand and have no words for and so forth, as they're experiencing this inner flow that is reaching deeper and deeper, finer and finer levels of consciousness. These are all levels of consciousness, these lands. And then finally, those disappearing into formlessness, like the sugar cube into tea. So you get Kaivalya. It means that in Buddhism, at this land, you're beginning to be able to dissolve yourself into that formlessness and then come back and dissolve yourself. Sounds a lot like Sri Ramakrishna staying in Bhavamukha. Of course, he was a past master of it, but for people having their first glimpses of that in this lifetime or in this series of lifetimes, getting rid of these series of karmas and these samskaras, that's going to be something fresh and new and thrilling and off-putting, depending on the condition of your mind in meditation when you encounter it. If you're in a tamasic cycle, you're going to be afraid of it. If you're in a sattvic cycle, you're going to say, hey, let's go there, you see. And no fear will be there. So you have to take in consideration the mind. The mind is very important, my dear, at this stage of the game, Holy Mother said. You're going to have to use it to get to Brahman. It's just verification for what I've been saying earlier in the class, is that you cannot jump steps and expect to stay unless you're a past master. You can pretty much, like Buddha could look at the river of time, sit on its banks, right? See everything pass, so he knew that it was all cyclic. So then he can get out of cycles. And that's going to take Kaivalya to do that, because nature is a cycle-producing machine, a form-producing machine, so you're going to have to divorce yourself from it. That is, consciousness, if you want to put it kindly in Tantra, consciousness and matter have a relationship. The problem with the relationship is that matter wants to take over consciousness. And consciousness forgets itself in matter. It's always got to be the master of matter, and know that matter came out of it, that bodies are produced by the mind. And nature just adds the 5 elements. And your mind adds the congealing power in Maya to be able to form bodies. That's why rebirth, the idea of rebirth, is built upon that, back many lifetimes. So, a beautiful system to study then, and you can see what the consummate Buddhist who is fast becoming a non-Buddhist is all about. If he wants to save all sentient souls, he has to give up Buddhism. You have to give up whatever ism you're in. Sri Ramakrishna used to say, and of course that happens later, but Ramakrishna used to say, words like Christianity, Judaism, Hinduism, they're positive blocks to the spiritual growth of mankind. So it's a very radical teaching. In India it was radical because you've got so many sampradayas, so many sects, so many different systems, some people following all these different systems for thousands of years old, and they all think their own way is right. That's why he said, only my watch keeps the right time, right? They all think that. He's not talking about some hypocritical individual. He's talking about these whole systems that fight each other. Like cells not getting along in the same body. Eventually some of them get cancer. Like religion's deteriorating. So go to the sundial, he said. Forget the watch, go to the sundial and find the universal time for all time, beyond time. Desha, Kala, Nimitta, and so forth. Go beyond those. They're in the mind too. So if you're purifying the mind in this way, then eventually you'll get to a far-reaching land. But first, in the 6th land still, you transcend the need for discriminating thought. You achieve shunyata, perception of voidness. You perfect wisdom, that's called pragya in Buddhism. And about that time you may be singing something like this. Jo kuchai so tu ihai tujse humne dil ko lagaya ek tujhko apan apaya ek tujhko apan apaya jo kuchai so tu ihai tujhse humne dil ko lagaya. I have finally understood, O Lord, that everything exists in Thee. Every heart is ultimately united with Thee. Nothing exists but Thee. Churches, temples, Kaaba, all places of worship, You fashion them and cause all beings to bow down in them. You have become the worshipper, the act of worship, and the place of worship. Nothing exists but Thee. And more pertinent to this sloka and these charts and this point, from the life heavens throughout the boundless universe and even into the dark nether regions, wherever our souls journey, we find only Thee, for nothing exists but Thee. Matchless is Your presence, O Lord. I have found nothing to compare to it. Contemplating it, this humble singer, Jafar, has become illumined, and this simple truth has dawned upon his understanding, that nothing exists but Thee. a ghazal of India, one of the classical spiritual songs that they sing. And Jafar was the composer. So there are very few, they're called stotrams basically, but there are very few musical offerings that are purely non-dual, like Hastamalaka Stotram, Nirvana Shatkam, like we often sing, Namrichor na Shanka, Name Jati Beda, Pita Naiva Me Naiva, Mata Majanmaha, Chidananda Rupaha, Shivoham, Shivoham. I have no death. Why? Because I was never born. I have no father and mother, no friends, no companions. I am Shiva, I am Shiva. I am pure conscious awareness. Shivoham, Shivoham. So Shankara, whose teacher in that lifetime was the father of yoga, that is, Patanjali had reincarnated as Govindapada to teach Shankara a few things that that great soul didn't recall immediately. One of those, ironically enough, was asana. Shankara had passed it all by, the body and all that. He says, well, here, let me fill in a few little things. You're going to meet some people in this age that are going to be obsessed with this. Try and show them the ekasana position, or that's what they're headed for, you see. But Govindapada had a cave-in. He was in his cave near a village, and he was stuck in there. So he said, oh, well, I'll give up the body in a cave, that's fine. And so Shankara was traveling as a teenager, trying to find he had convinced his mother to let him go through some beautiful story of its own, but he was traveling to find his teacher, his guru. Must be one out there for me. He knew all the scriptures at 8, so it was going to be hard to find that teacher. So he reached that village, and the village, oh, there's a great sage up in the hill up there named Govindapada. And so Shankara got some people together, excavation crew, you see, started taking away boulders, and went in and found him almost passed from the body, sitting in yoga position. Recently heard of one of my friends who's a painter, passed away 4 years ago, and they found him like that, sitting in lotus position. So Shankara goes up to Govindapada and wakes him up by mantra and so forth, and then the teaching goes on for a while like that. But nobody knows, very few know that that was Patanjali in his next incarnation. So 140 AD to around 700 AD, there you have it, you see, 500 or 600 years. Come back in the body again to tie loose ends or finish up things. Many reasons why souls get born in Maya or in Mahamaya. Better probably to keep Mahamaya in mind. So yes, beautiful if you put it into musical form too. Now achieves shunyata, perception of voidness, and perfects wisdom. So then in the Durangama Bhumi, which is the far-reaching land, you just went through the wisdom view land, now the far-reaching land comes into view. All internal realms, you don't look up and go like this to them. You're moving inside to the ultimate source, which is causeless. They call it the causeless cause. You attain skillful means to guide others. You can be reborn in any form of choice. The Tibetans, of course, since 700 AD, about the time of Shankara, and onward, have been meditating on bardos and so forth in their own way, and knowing that the soul can choose its parents and its country and so forth. Transcends all possibility of regression. And see how careful you have to be in Buddhism and Vedanta both. Not only not to assign Nirvikalpa Samadhi to some brochure or something, but to make sure that you know that even when you've got very high wisdom, you have to remain on guard against Maya. If you're coming into Maya, even to help others, it's very possible you can get influenced by their ignorance. by their karma, by a society's karma. And then start developing the little karmas of your own that you're going to have to be reborn to handle. So you take very deep care with that, and stay with the tradition, and stay with your teacher, and follow the tradition, as my teacher used to say. You can easily get off the path. And that even happens to the wise sometimes. Achala bhumi is the immovable land. There you're beginning to find something that's more stationary, beyond form, and beyond mental, subtlest mental impediments. Ramakrishna used to say, if the slightest thread fiber appears outside the thread, then you can't pass it through the needle. Sometimes you can't even see that fiber. See? Especially if you're an old seamstress. So it's not working. So you lick it, to smooth it out. Even if you can't see it, you know it's there. So you gain that ability to see these very, very subtle things and smooth them out for all time. So you can see there, you gain freedom from obstacles. They don't plague you anymore. This is described also in Patanjali's Yoga. So I've made such a thorough study of Patanjali's Yoga, and it's the most complex system in existence, except Tantra, which was really never systematized. It's too vast. But Patanjali's Yoga was put into a system, and so now that I look at Buddhism, I just say, these are the same thing. I mean, they borrowed from each other. They're so influencing each other, and you say, well, yes, why not? Vivekananda said Buddhism and Vedanta are the same thing, because they're both from India. And I've often told the story of going to my Indian students' homes. Would you come and do a blessing at my shrine and so forth, do an arati, and go do that and see Buddha there and say, oh, are you Buddhist? And they say, what's that? Some of them don't even know what a Buddhist is. These dear, sweet devotees of the Lord. It's just all to them God. It's sort of like back to this song. Even if they don't have the specifically innate pragya wisdom of an advanced Jnani in their very hearts, because they're pure bhaktas, they know this almost by intuition. Comes to know the time of personal Buddhahood. This has to be confirmed by other Buddhas, but now you're getting the idea of the truth that's coming, that I am close to actually dawning upon myself the title of a Buddha. Because, Lord Buddha didn't make any bones about it, and it was very simple. You may say anything about me you want, but you must know that I'm awakened. And that's about as far as he described himself anywhere. Awakened then must be a very profound thing. And at some stages of that awakening, there's a chance of falling back to sleep. That's why you make sure that, you do the mental work that you're supposed to, because the mind is what's going to cause you to fall back to sleep. It's been sleeping for aeons. That is, sleeping and waking, sleeping and waking, sleeping and waking, going into deep sleep. And it's developed a habit. So that habit of sleeping and waking is in your earliest samskara, when you took your first birth, as it were. And so that's a very, very subtle samskara in you. And so along, probably right next to it, is desire for nature, for form. Desire to be reborn is a great barrier to your highest enlightenment. So when, like we just sang, Nam Richor Nashanka, I never die because I was never born, then this is a soul who came into the body knowing that he was not the body, and that the body doesn't really have a birth. I mean, we can envision Shankara and Buddha in our mind's eye right now, so they're really the subtle body. Their physical body is gone. We don't have pictures of them, but we can still feel and see with our mind's eye their subtle bodies. They last a lot longer than our relatives and our ancestors, because we ourselves pass, and the memory of them gets erased. They didn't really cause much impression on us, did they? And the impression they did cause sometimes was negative. That's why you're born again with your ancestors over and over again, which Buddha wanted to end. Opened a way to get beyond your ancestors, because he knew that, like Christ had said 500 years later, would say, enemies are really members of your own family. He said, that's your enemy, members of your own family. So, going to have to inspect deeply these compelling thoughts and will and mind, and its persnickety attachment and clinging to fear of death, or to the desire to be reborn, or to the habit of sleeping and waking. You must develop yogic insomnia, so if you did that, you're coming close to being an ever-awake soul. Prabhuta Bharata, ever-awakened India. Pratisthit, I am all ever awake, you see, as tantricists say. And finally, as we run close to the end, let's look at the final bullet point here. After coming to know the time of personal Buddhahood, begins to transmit merits to others. The transmission is very important. Lex Hixon brought that out. That if you sit in the presence of a soul, you shouldn't just say, oh, I'm learning something now, but you say, I'm getting a wisdom transmission. And I did that with my teacher. I opened up and heard every word he said, and was hanging on the edge of my seat with Swami Sheshanandaji Maharaj every time I went there. It was not a matter of sleep or tiredness. It was, here I am, this is my opportunity. He's saying the truth. I finally found someone who is. I better be there for it, 100%. So that's a good, will stand you in good stead for future Buddhahood, or attaining the higher bhumis, even in Vedanta. Then you have, penultimately, sadhu mati bhumi, pure mind land. The bodhisattva attains full bodhisattvahood there, has all 6 abhigyas, I think they're up here. Wealth and power can come to them, divine hearing, perceiving others' thoughts, recollection of past lives, divine sight, and the certainty of enlightenment are those 6 abhigyas. Attains all of those in full. Has the 8 liberations. I didn't put that there, probably not enough room. And has all 10 dasabalas, those I put. Has knowledge concerning the deaths and rebirths of all beings. Of course, the Tibetan Buddhists and the Bardos exemplify that. Has knowledge concerning purity and impurity that's in the mind. Has knowledge concerning the ripening of deeds at the right time, auspicious timing we call it in Vedanta. That's very powerful. I want that. And then has knowledge concerning all the absorptions and liberations possible to the soul. Has knowledge of the paths leading to all the worlds, all these little paths. Has knowledge concerning the constituents of the world. We call those the 24 tattvas in our tradition, or Shaivism would say 36. So all the principles of how the world is built upon, it's the iceberg in toto, both tip and bulk, has knowledge of all that. Because remember, there's nature and there's the soul from the very beginning, and they have a relationship. The two mix, but oil and water cannot mix for long, so the soul must keep or seek its isolation from nature, knowing that it's sentient and nature has come out of it as an insentient principle. So all the worlds are known as a composite of principles, and they know what they are, what the ingredients of them are. Intelligence, thought, all the way down to the 5 elements. Knowledge concerning the exhaustion of defilements. As well, the end of karma is coming. If you had one prayer for God, Holy Mother said, what would you pray for? In a word, nirvasana, extinction of desires, because you would be liberated immediately if you could do away with your desires. Knowledge concerning tendencies of other beings, and knowledge concerning what is possible and what is not at any given time. That's a good power to have. Now, that's the 8 dasabalas. Also has the 4 certitudes and knows all dharmas and transmits them. And that's where you can't say, well, I'm really a Buddhist anymore, I'm a Vedantist, or I'm any kind of ist, or I follow any kind of ism. You know, I'm going to sing you a song now. Oh, I see God in everything. It's everywhere. Then 10 is the Dharma Megabhumi, the land of Dharma clouds. There, the bodhisattva who is perfected has wisdom, compassion, and boundless virtue. They get their Buddhahood confirmed. And why do I have the star there? Has matured Trikaya, wisdom of the 3 bodies of the Buddha, and abides in the Buddha fields permanently. Even when they appear on earth, they're abiding in the Buddha fields. I mean, we don't have time for this, but these last teachings have connecting charts and wisdom with them that could take us even deeper into these 10 pure lands. May we all attain them, one by one, if necessary, all at once if Mother wills. And may we be ready for them when they appear to us, in us. Om Tat Nayo, Om Tat Nayo, Ravrini Mahe, Gatung Yagyaya, Gatung Yena Pataye, Daivi Swastarastu Naha, Swastir Manusebhyaha, Urdvam Jigatu Bhesajam, Sangnovastu Dvipade Sangchatushpate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May we make a wholehearted offering of the small self into the great self. May we always delight in this offering, and may we always revere the Lord and Mother of all sacrifices. May divine blessings be upon us. May peace be unto the entire human race. May healing, well-being, and prosperity then also abide among us. Om, peace, peace, peace. May peace be unto us, and may peace be unto all. Om Hari Om.